Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are working on Sejanus, his fall, and we've made it to Act 5, Scene 10. We are in the final scene of the play, but we still got a ways to go, and today's is a very long monologue. We got to hear from Praecones, who is like the herald of the Senate. He's the guy that reads the stuff out when they have something that they want to talk about. So we're going to get to that in just a second. But since we're in Act 5, Scene 10, we got to cover Act 5, Scene 9, which should be quick because it's only 7 lines long. So prior to Act 5, Scene 9, we have Sejanus feeling like he's on top of the world, and everybody thinks that he is going to get all of the tribunal powers at this Senate meeting that has been called in the middle of the night by Macro and all of these sorts of things. So Sejanus is treating this almost like he's ascending to godlike status. Coming into this meeting. So Act 5, Scene 9 is 7 lines long and is between Macro and Laco. And Macro is like, okay, as soon as all of the senators are inside, close the doors and lock them. Lock everybody inside. And Lacro's like, okay, cool. And he's like, you might hear some commotion coming in from inside. If anybody tries to break out, stop them and kill them if you have to. Laco's like, okay, cool. And that's Act 5, Scene 9. So Act 5, Scene 10, we are inside the Senate chamber and all of the senators have arrived, everybody's sitting around. The scene starts out with a lot of just like hubbub sort of chatter, like, oh, there's Sejanus and he looks great and he's so wonderful and he's going to get all the tribunal power and we got to make sure that we're still on his good side, and like all of this sort of chatter, while Aruntius and Lepidus are sitting over here and they're like, look at all these idiots, you know, this is a bunch of ridiculous stuff. But even the Sejanus faction notices that these two are not participating really in all of the hubbub and fun and excitement and so on and so forth. And finally they get to Praecones stands up and starts to speak about things. And they're like, oh, listen, isn't this great? He's getting all the tribunal power, blah, 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 blah. And with all of these interruptions, Praecones, today's monologue is going to be him reading off these letters. So he's handed these letters, like this sealed document that is supposed to bestow all of these honors on Sejanus. So everybody's like, open it and read it, open it and read it. They're really excited about it. So today's monologue is him reading that out. Just a quick side note. Throughout this, there's lots of like, here, here type comments. And I'm not going to do the whole hat switching thing to put all of those in. Just know that there's like general hubbub and mutterings of agreement or dissent, depending on who they're coming from, and usually coming from both sides in regard to what Praecones is saying. So after all this, he has the letters. They're like, open them, read them. This is so exciting. He's going to get the powers. And Praecones says, silence. Tiberius Caesar, to the Senate, greeting. If you, conscript fathers, with your children be in health, it is abundantly well. We, with our friends here, are so. The care of the Commonwealth, howsoever we are removed in person, cannot be absent to our thought, although, oftentimes, even to princes most present, the truth of their own affairs is hid, than which nothing falls out more miserable to a state, or makes the art of governing more difficult. But since it hath been our easeful happiness to enjoy both the aids and industry of so vigilant a Senate, we profess to have been the more indulgent to our pleasures, not as being careless of our office, but rather secure of the necessity. Neither do these common rumors of many, and infamous libels published against our retirement, at all afflict us, being born more out of men's ignorance than their malice, and will, neglected, find their own grave quickly. Whereas, too sensibly acknowledged, it would make their obloquy ours. Nor do we desire their authors, though found, be censured, since in a free state as ours, all men ought to enjoy both their minds and tongues free. Yet in things which shall worthily and more near concern the majesty of a prince, we shall fear to be so unnaturally cruel to our own fame as to neglect them. True it is, conscript fathers, that we have raised Sejanus from obscure and almost unknown gentry to the highest and most conspicuous point of greatness, and, we hope, deservingly, yet not without danger. it being a most bold hazard in that sovereign who, by his particular love to one, dares adventure the hatred of all his other subjects. But we affy in your loves and understandings, and do no way suspect the merit of our Sejanus, to make our favours offensive to any. Though we could have wished his zeal had run a calmer course against Agrippina and our nephews, howsoever the openness of their actions declared them delinquents, and that he would have remembered, no innocence is so safe, but it rejoiceth to stand in the sight of mercy, the use of which in us he hath so quite taken away towards them by his loyal fury, as now our clemency would be thought but wearied cruelty, if we should offer to exercise it. Some there be that would interpret this his public severity to be particular ambition, and that, under a pretext of service to us, he doth but remove his own lets, alleging the strengths he hath made to himself by the Praetorian soldiers, by his faction in court and senate, by the offices he holds himself and confers on others, his popularity and dependence, his urging and almost driving us to this, our unwilling retirement, and lastly, his aspiring to be our son-in-law. Your wisdoms, conscript fathers, are able to examine and censure these suggestions. But, were they left to our absolving voice, we durst pronounce them, as we think them, most malicious. Yet are they offered to be averred, and on the lives of the informers. What we should say, or rather what we should not say, lords of the Senate, if this be true, our gods and goddesses confound us if we know. Only we must think we have placed our benefits ill, and conclude that in our choice either we were wanting to the gods, or the gods to us. We have not been covetous, honorable fathers, to change, neither is it now any new lust that alters our affection, or old loathing, but those needful jealousies of state that warn wiser princes hourly to provide their safety, and do teach them how learned a thing it is to beware of the humblest enemy, much more of those great ones, whom their own employed favors have made fit for their fears. We therefore desire that the offices he holds be first seized by the Senate, and himself suspended from all exercise of place or power. And then there's a lot of rabble, and Sejanus tries to get them to stop reading this stuff, but Praetorius continues. Silence! And himself suspended from all exercise of place or power, but till due and mature trial be made of his innocency, which yet we can faintly apprehend the necessity to doubt. If, conscript fathers, to your more searching wisdoms there shall appear farther cause, or of farther proceeding, either to seizure of lands, goods, or more, it is not our power that shall limit your authority, or our favor that must corrupt your justice. Either were dishonorable in you, and both uncharitable to ourself. We would willingly be present with your counsels in this business, but the danger of so potent a faction, if it should prove so, forbids our attempting it, except one of the councils would be entreated for our safety to undertake the guard of us home, then we should most readily adventure. In the meantime, it shall not be fit for us to importune so judicious a senate, who know how much they hurt the innocent, that spare the guilty, and how grateful a sacrifice to the gods is the life of an ingrateful person. We reflect not in this on Sejanus, notwithstanding if you keep an eye upon him. And there is Lotarius, a senator, and Pinarius Nata, two of his most trusted ministers, and so professed, whom we desire not to have apprehended, but as the necessity of the cause exacts it. So this is a departure from what everybody thinks was going to be said. What he's reading out is a letter from Tiberius, a letter from Caesar to the entire Senate, addressing all of the Senate. And, he makes the fancy apologies for like, sorry that I'm not there, and please know that it's not that I'm not paying attention to what's going on in Rome. I still very much am paying attention. I just have to be far away right now. And part of the reason why I've been a little bit disconnected is because I was trusting in the people that I had put in place to do things for me. Amongst those was Sejanus. And I know that there's rumors that I raised Sejanus up from nothingness, maybe to bad effect, but he really did seem to deserve a lot of these things that we bestowed upon him. But it's possible that some of the choices that he made were not made in the best interest of Rome and were actually made maliciously. Tiberius doesn't necessarily offer up any proof of this, but he does say that Sejanus is now stripped of all titles, all positions, all place in the court and everything like that, until he can be put on trial to determine if any of the stuff that he did was wrong. And it's going to be up to the Senate to determine whether or not the things that he did were wrong. And he's like, I would love to be there for this, for you, but it's not safe for me to travel right now unless somebody wants to come and get me and escort me back to ensure my safety. That's that. And he's like, this also isn't just like a random witch hunt, because two of his closest advisors, Latarius and Nata, are not being arrested right now. It's only Sejanus that's being arrested because he's done some things that could maybe be malicious. So, great big surprise. And you can imagine all of the rabble that's been going on through this whole thing. We have the Sejanus faction who was like cheering and applauding when they were talking about how great Sejanus is. And then we have the Agrippina faction who's like, roar, grumble, grumble. But when we find out that those roles have been switched, or the expectations have been flipped on their head, then those roles switch. And the Agrippina crew is like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. And the Sejanus crew is like, what? How could this possibly happen? So there is some fallout from this before tomorrow's monologue, but seeing as this video is already extremely long, we'll dig into more of that tomorrow. So until then, just sit with this. Think about how long in Act 5 we've been building up that Sejanus is about to ascend to godlike status. The entire Senate is there. They are locked into this room under orders that if anybody tries to leave, they're going to be fined loads of money, and they're going to run into Laco outside, who's been instructed that it's okay to kill them if they try to leave. So everybody is stuck in here with these super high stakes, and they all think that Sejanus is going to be honored. So they've all been kissing his butt and aligning themselves with him and all that. And they find out that actually he is being just about as dishonored as he can be. He has no title, he has no place, he has no power. It's all stripped from him like that in front of all of their faces. So yeah, with that hanging in the air, come on back tomorrow for more and we'll see how it all falls out. Mwah.